Welcome to It's All About the Questions, where learning to ask the right questions can help you achieve lifelong success. Now, here to help you ask all the right questions is award-winning author, international speaker, and business strategist, Laura Stewart.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone, and welcome to the show. For those watching live, this is Wednesday, not Tuesday. For those listening to podcasts, the day doesn't matter, but I'm excited to be here today. And for those live, I apologize for the not being right on time today. We had some technical difficulties, but it's well worth the wait, I promise you, because I've got an amazing guest today who I love and adore and devour every single thing this man writes. So I'm excited to be here today. We're going to dive right in. I've got Brandon Webb here today. He is a multiple New York Times bestselling author. He is this amazing man. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's a Navy SEAL. He's a SEAL sniper. He helped revamp SEAL sniper training school, adding mindfulness. He runs amazing military websites. He's an advisor. He has talked on newscasts often about what's going on in the world today. He is currently overseas, and he has agreed to be here with us today. We're also going to be talking about his latest book and his first fiction book with John David Mann, Steal Fear. Buy this book, everybody. I read it in multiple draft versions and final versions, and I have to tell you, I could not put it down. Go to the bathroom before you read this book because you're not going to be able to put it down. All right, let's bring Brandon onto the show. Brandon, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Always good to be on the show, Laura.
Yeah, and it's always great to have you on the show. I'm thinking might be the fourth or even maybe fifth time for you to be on the show. You and John David Mann are the only ones that have ever been on the show that many times.
Thanks.
Your latest book, Steal Fear.
Yeah. This
is your first fiction book. I've read, I think, every single thing you've written. Have dog-eared copies in boxes right now because I've been renovating the upstairs, as my listeners know, due to mold, and I didn't want anything to happen to the books. Total Focus, Mastering Fear, Among Heroes, The Red Circle, The Killing School, The Making of a Navy SEAL, Benghazi. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on, Brandon. I don't know how you were so prolific along with your day job of SOFREP, if I'm pronouncing it right, .com, this amazing website community all about military stuff and what's going on. I mean, how do you do it all?
Well, and it's SOFREP. So SOFREP is Special Operations Forces Report. It's a pro word we just made up among the military pro words. I think it's, for me, I got really good at writing nonfiction starting SOFREP 8 years ago. I write for the site still today. I write 3 to 5 articles a week for SOFREP. And I think something like 2,000 plus articles I've written. So, not only does that get you good at writing, it's very, I can take some of the stuff I've written for the site and compile it and help, or, when John and I are working on something, we have a lot of stuff from myself plus our other writers for SOFREP to kind of dig into. So it's very complementary to writing the books. So there's a lot of material there that I can pull from. So yeah, I think that, the two work very well together.
Well, what I thought was really interesting when you and John mentioned to me that you were going to be writing a fiction book was, okay, what is this book going to be about that they're going to write? I can only imagine there's going to be something military in it. And it is. It's about a serial killer on an aircraft carrier. But the depth of the book really surprised me and it scared the heck out of me. Honestly, it really did scare the heck out of me because I saw that this could actually happen. and all of these pieces that could go on. I know some of it you guys have said came from different real life experiences you had, Brandon. Can we talk about that some more? How you figure out how to play that all in?
Yeah. So, and what I like about the book is it's cross genre. It's kind of a bit of Clancy and a bit of Agatha Christie. You have like the military thriller, crime, kind of
Right.
crime novel. But the book was based on an experience I had on the Abe Lincoln, which is the same ship we use in the book, Steel Fear. Uh, when I think it was around 95, before I was a SEAL, I was a Navy search and rescue swimmer in helicopters and was stationed with a helicopter squadron called HS6 out of San Diego. And the helicopter and the rest of the airplane squadrons deploy onto the aircraft carrier for this 6-month deployment that ultimately takes you to the Persian Gulf, kind of, to keep stability in the region. This was a time when the women were just getting integrated into Navy combat roles, so that we had, for the first time, women on the ship. We had women helicopter pilots. And so the Navy was still kind of trying to figure this all out, right? And when you think, however many 100+ years before that, it was just men on ships, and you have one bathroom, one shower area, and you just don't have to worry about different places to shower, sleep, go to the bathrooms, and so on. But we had a sexual predator on the boat. We had a guy that was, assuming it was a guy, that assaulted 6 or 7 women while they were taking showers, all at different locations, usually at night. And he would hit the lights, and he had assaulted these women. And I remember talking to one of the helicopter pilots, Mona, in our squadron, and just remembering how terrified she was. And even these guys in laundry were slipping notes into her laundry bag, like these very derogatory messages. It was like a very terrifying time for women on the ship. And John and I talked about it in the Red Circle, my time on the Abe Lincoln, and the captain wasn't a great captain of the ship. And so we based the captain, Eagleburg, and Steel Fear on the same guy, because and it was funny. I was on James Altucher's podcast a few weeks ago, and he said you could teach a leadership course off of Steel Fear, because
yes.
We get into like the good, the bad parts of leadership. But the story was inspired by this event that occurred, and it just kind of stuck with me through the years. And when John and I started working together over a decade ago, I said, hey, I think eventually I would like to explore fiction, because I had written a few like small format articles for FHM and Maxim when I was just getting into writing, but all fiction based on kind of real events. And I asked John, I was like, I have this concept, rather than the sexual predator, what if it was a Hannibal Lecter-like serial killer let loose on the ship and taking advantage of this like poor leadership environment and in a complex aircraft carrier environment, which is basically in many cases bigger than small towns in America. It's 6,000 people on the ship. You have a full, laundry, trash, multiple mess halls. It's like a city, shopping stores, libraries. It's just like this huge world that we created, which again was one of the biggest challenges I think John and I had, was how do you create this world and in a way where the reader doesn't feel too what's the word I'm looking for? Intimidated. Doesn't feel intimidated. Can kind of like go, wow, this is crazy. I never realized a ship like this was so complex. But anyway, that's the origin of where the story came from, and then we had a blast writing it. We didn't think it was going to be a series, but it just kind of turned out that way. It's kind of an hero's origin story for one of our main characters, Finn. So we're just about to finish book 2, which is Cold Fear. It takes place in Iceland. We've got a finished draft. I'm actually working on a fight scene today. So it's two fight scenes.
I haven't seen a draft of that one yet, and I can tell you I can't wait. I love reading like the early versions of the book. You telling your story about the first women on the aircraft carrier and how much this matches with your real life. I recently had my 40th high school reunion, and it was a great opportunity because we did it via Zoom. So we actually had more women. I went to an all-girls Catholic school, Ursuline School in New Rochelle. We actually had more women show up on Zoom because no matter where they were in the world, they were able to be there versus having to all get on planes, especially with COVID. And there was one woman I was really curious to hear what she had been up to, because I remember throughout our senior year, she just kept saying she was going to be the first woman on an aircraft carrier, and she was going to be a pilot. And she ended up being a Navy pilot for helicopters on aircraft carriers, and she was one of the first women on it. And Maura Quinn, this is a shout out to you with how awesome you are. I don't know if you ever met her in your travels, but when I was reading the book, it was like, oh my God, I could picture what she probably had to go through. Plus, I have a dear friend, Colonel Deb Lewis. She was in the Army and in the Pentagon, and she was on hit lists and all that stuff while she was deployed. So reading all of that and having yours and John's perspective, really, as a woman reading the book, I went, wow, they really got that perspective. They understood what a woman in the military back then and even now is still going through with all of that. When you decided to write this and you started putting it together, had there been anything like this out there, that the government didn't want to talk about yet? Did where you were traveling on the boat? Because some of this stuff is like, wow, there's way too much that's real, unless I'm just being conspiracy theory person. I'm trying not to share any spoilers here while intriguing people, because I really want to say certain things.
Yeah, no, it's very real. I think, to your point, I think this is a positive reflection on the Navy and the chain of command in many ways, but it's not like Top Gun, right? It's not a rah military movie. And even when we ended up selling the rights to Peacock for streaming series, we had a big Hollywood producer that takes on these big movies, blockbusters, but mostly just, this kind of rah stuff. And it was like, hey, we don't want to make that series or movie. This is not kind of the core of what we get into with Steel Fear. So, it's very real. From the woman point of view, it was important for me to have strong woman characters and represent that kind of period in time where women were just kind of getting into the Navy and going up the chain of command. And we had lots of help with that. Carrie Lorenz, which is one of the first F-14 pilots, she's a friend of mine. We had many conversations with her and kind of about her perspective and how challenging it was to be among the first group of women, to kind of get into these pilot leadership roles. So, and I think, we have extremely strong female characters in the book. Monica, the admiral of the whole Navy, is the fleet as a woman, and that was something that it was important to me because it was the way it happened, and there are great women leaders in the military, and I wanted to show that because typically, it's when you talk about military thrillers and those kind of movies, it's mostly the strong male lead character that's in this position of power, and that's not today's military.
The main character who's investigating everything, what I loved is he had his foibles, shall we say, and he had his idiosyncrasies, but he didn't look like what you expect like like the lead child, Jack Reacher. When you see these characters written by so many other authors, they tend to be physically larger than life. And that's really not the case. And I felt that it humanized and made it even more real for me because, like you said, Top Gun, the Val Kilmer character, Tom Cruise, they always portray him much bigger than he is because he's actually quite short. But it's always this impression of this larger than life, perfect kind of person. And yet you chose not to do that. By making it this character more human, yet beyond human in some ways, because of the Navy SEAL training that you guys have gone through. It added another element to that. And I'm curious why you and John took that tactic.
Well, I think we did it because the common kind of bias is to imagine this, Arnold Schwarzenegger like Navy SEAL character, and that's not the case. I think the average height of a SEAL is something like 5'8". So it's not the case, and there's just this common misperception that's out there that exists, and that for sure was intentional and something we wanted to address with the character Finn. And I think just to give people a visual, John and I always talk about like our dream actor to play Finn would be Rami Malek, right? And he has that look, that kind of scrawny, lanky, smart, but there's definitely some depth, behind those eyes. So that's kind of like where we were going with the Finn character. If there was one actor we both, I think, would love to see play Finn, it would be him. And a guy like him who just doesn't kind of show up as a typical stereotype.
Yeah, I loved that. And it was yet one more thing that caused me to get lost in the book. And actually, at one point, it was like 2:00 in the morning, and the only light that was on was right where I was reading. And I got up because I heard a noise and I was really scared. And I'm like, oh my God, wait, I got to turn some more lights on in the house because, what if, I know I'm not on the carrier. I know I'm not wherever it's happening, but it was so real.
That's good to hear.
And, I agree with the person who did the last interview with you that this book, you could create so many leadership lessons from the book and so many real life lessons too about how we handle situations. In some ways, it was like your book, Mastering Fear, for me, where I talk about your book all the time, Mastering Fear, because people are like, oh, well, I don't want to read it because it's going to be this Navy SEAL take on you have to just confront it and dive into the middle of the pool. And I'm like, oh, you have to read this book because, the opening sequence is Mastering Fear is maybe just dipping your toe in the water and sitting on the side of the pool so that you're comfortable with the environment. And I would love to see something come from the fear books that you're writing, Steel Fear, Cold Fear, some other element to it. That would be awesome.
Well, that's something John and I are discussing right now with book 2. And we looked at, okay, what makes Steel Fear such a cool, unique book, all these elements, and the big element that shows up for me and all these other people are this kind of philosophy of leadership and excellence, which John and I talked about in the Red Circle, our first book together, and I think we're trying to figure out, okay, what are the lessons in this story where we can kind of talk about that as a common theme, in very similar way that Ayn Rand developed her own personal philosophy in her novels. Probably the biggest, Atlas Shrugged. So that's something that I feel strongly about. So hopefully the readers will be able to kind of see that going forward, and as we as we dive into the series, which, you know, book 2 is quite the book. And there's a lot of unresolved issues with no spoilers with a couple of the main characters, Finn included, that, you know, we're hopefully will resolve in book 3 or 4. But it's fun. Like writing fiction is just, the gloves are off and you can have at it. And in many ways, John and I talked about this the other night when we're at and we were doing an indie bookstore event on Zoom. And in many ways, you can really get raw and write more real in fiction, because a lot of times in the nonfiction world, and I learned this lesson the hard way at the Red Circle, you know, I would ask people, hey, can I talk about this time that we spent together? And they're like, oh yeah, no problem. They give you permission. And then you tell this raw story and they're like, oh my God, like I didn't remember it that way. And it creates a lot of drama and problem. Even my father he was really upset with a lot of what was portrayed in the book. And I tried to tell him, look, Dad, this is my 16-year-old self remembering it from my experience. I can't possibly replicate yours. You're gonna have to write your own book. But
Right.
it causes a lot of problems. So fiction is like no issues. It's just like get as real and raw and crazy as you want.
Yeah, I remember reading specifically The Killing School and going, oh my God, I wonder what the people that really were in these particular things are thinking reading this right now, because the books were so vivid. And it was definitely from your perspective, plus stepping back from your situation and looking at it, you know, from the outside looking in. But yeah, fiction does allow you to do a lot, but you also have to be careful when there's some real situations as well that people, you know, yes, the names have been changed to protect the innocent, but people can still read into it. And how did you deal with that?
I mean, it's tough. I mean, you can just kind of get away with it if you change the name. But for instance, you know, the captain of the Kitty Hawk, we to honor him, put him in by name, because he was a great leader. So, but yeah, in most cases, you really just can get away with it. I mean, people can make all the assumptions they want. I mean, most of the main characters are a mashup of 2 or 3 real people John and I know in real life. So,
Okay.
it's just.
All right. Now you're overseas right now with your son. What made you, you know, just taking like a little jump in the middle of promoting your book and everything. And I know it's not like it used to be promoting your book where you can go to live events and do all that great stuff. What made you decide to just go overseas right now while you're promoting this?
Well, it was mainly I've been coming to Europe for 4 years every summer to vacation for, you know, a month or 2. My son is going to St. Andrews in Scotland. He'll be his 2nd year this year. I had tons of friends in Europe, and I just wanted to kind of shake off the COVID cobwebs and get out. I've been vaccinated, and as soon as they opened up the EU, I said, okay, I'm going to go see some friends of mine. Actually met my girlfriend at the beginning of summer in Italy, so it was quite the romantic meeting. Yeah, I just wanted to get out. And plus the fact that you mentioned that this isn't typically when you launch a book, there's these in-person events, the signings, the bookstore events, you know, in live media where you're on radio in New York or on television. This wasn't the case. So it may be some late nights for me, but I'm willing to like suck it up and, and get over here. So I've done probably 4 1 a.m. events, but it's just something I'm like, okay, I'll take an espresso and stay up and knock it out. And it's been worth it. I've had amazing 2 months. I go back to Puerto Rico on Saturday.
Okay. I don't know if we're getting feedback from some other thing in the room, but I'm hearing some other sounds starting to pick up.
I hear it too. Let me kill my speaker and see if that helps. I have an external speaker.
Okay. As long as you can hear me by killing the speaker.
Yeah, how's that?
Okay, let's see. Okay, that's better.
Yeah,
Okay,
I don't. I was listening as well.
Yeah, we were starting to get some feedback there. Okay, so you're over there in Europe, and it's still crazy COVID going on. What's it actually like?
The one thing that shows up for me is how the rest of the Europe kind of views America as just having a lot of problems, right? Especially with this latest Afghan incident. But also like thankful that America has the ability to regardless of who did it, like I think Trump did a really good job of just like, hey, we need a vaccine. He threw a bunch of money at it like an entrepreneur would. And we have largely probably one of the largest vaccine surpluses in the world. So I felt very lucky to be vaccinated in Europe, able to travel everywhere. I show the vaccine and it's like a golden ticket. You can kind of go everywhere.
Right.
And a lot of Europeans are not vaccinated. It depends on country to country in the EU. And that I thought, wow, there are still many great things about America that I appreciate, it, that being one of them. But then I think about my Australian friend living in Portugal that went for an ER visit. He had an allergic reaction and he had full on ER. I forget what medicine they gave him, but it was 40 euro for the whole thing. And it's some of the best healthcare in Europe and Portugal. And I was like, God, that would have been a $15,000 visit to a hospital in the US, which is kind of crazy. Like, I think we have big problems in America with healthcare, education, and government in general. We should not be, even my friends in Switzerland, right? And they pay a fair tax in Switzerland. Typically people pay about 20%, but they have a mandatory healthcare tax, and you can get incredible healthcare for no charge in Switzerland. And I just am shocked that in America, a kid that has money, parents have money to afford expensive healthcare, will get better cancer treatment than a poor kid. Like, that to me is just outrageous, because we're a very wealthy country and we should be taking better care of our citizens. And that's something that really bothers me outside of our pretty much non-existent foreign policy strategy, which
I do want to talk about. And you gave me permission to ask you about, but finish your thought.
But anyway, I could go on a tangent, but yeah, that I'd find diving into the Afghanistan thing, because it's personal to me. I've been talking about Afghanistan for a decade now. So glad to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, let's just dive into it, because it frightens me, because I don't feel like we're being given, sort of like with COVID and everything in our country for the last 6 years, everything's been so slanted in the media, right? Depending on what station you listen to, what newspaper, what news feed, what social media you're on, I don't feel like we really get even close to the real story, forget the whole story. And being a woman, it really concerns me about the Taliban in Afghanistan and all of that. I felt that they were going to be lying from the get-go. That interview they let the woman do, I'm like, okay, that's a setup. That's going to fail miserably the moment they get off the air. I wonder how that woman is and everything. And she had to do it, right? Because her life was on the line to do that. What, from your perspective, because I know you still have a lot of connections and you look at military things a very different way because of your background. I mean, what's your perspective on it, and what should we be thinking about? I mean, I'm scared. Honestly, Brandon, I am very scared about what this means.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, the big problem is that this kind of shines a light on a broader issue of America being I mean, I hate to use the comparison, but I feel like America as a global cop is similar to the policing issues we're having back home, right? It's just kind of run in, shoot first, figure things out later. And we're seeing this now because 20 years, I think $2 trillion spent in Afghanistan, 2,000 lives lost. And in a second, it shows you how fast the Taliban they have more, basically control the entire country, which they didn't have when we went in 2001. They're backed by the Chinese now. And so you have this issue of China trying to push their influence on the rest of the world in a very thought out, long-term vision way. And the rest of we're trying to promote democracy in the world, and people can't take us for our word anymore because we left Afghans hanging, right? We couldn't even have like a dignified pullout in Afghanistan. We have people getting trampled to death at the airport, and people terrified that, women top of the list, right? Terrified what's going to happen to me. I just bought into this kind of American way, an American-backed government, which has gone overnight. But we couldn't even have a dignified pullout. Now the Taliban actually have probably hundreds, if not billions of dollars worth of American weaponry.
Yeah, I'm waiting for somebody to drop a bomb on the base
and it's just crazy. But the bigger picture, it really shows that we have people, foreign governments are going to have a real hard time trusting America. And another example would be, I wrote about it in Benghazi, the definitive report. We had largely a situation where Gaddafi was cooperating. He's not a great guy, or he was not a great guy, but he was cooperating with kind of like the U.S. demands, and we just decide one day to whack him and take him out. And now you have a failed state still to this day, which is 8 years later. And what did we accomplish there? Like, what was the goal with that? What was, you can make an argument for whether we should or should have went into Iraq a second time, but we did. And so again, it's like, okay, maybe we made a mistake, but let's pull out in a way that doesn't destabilize the northern Arabian Gulf and kick off a group like ISIS and push Syria into civil war. And like the combination of that, of pulling out so quickly, you have this massive refugee crisis in influx into Europe, which Europe was largely trending open border, and now they're very closed border. Like, it's like, no, I don't want it. I only want so many refugees. You take the rest, Germany. And it's just become crazy. So, and again, it comes back to a question I asked. I remember the first time I really started talking publicly about Afghanistan, I was working for a big defense company, L3, and I was invited by a law firm, which was a friend of mine, was a partner at, and knew my background. And he said, hey, do you want to come to this kind of big defense industry dinner? We're having a couple big speakers. And one of them was Mary Walker. And she was amazing woman. She was the general counsel for the Air Force at the time. And she was just finishing her assignment. And at this dinner, I asked her, this would have been probably 2010. And I said, Mary, look, I served in Afghanistan 2001, 2002. We had a very clear purpose for being over there. Like, we knew why we were there. I said, it's 2010 now. I have friends that are still serving that have no idea what we're doing in the country. And I say, imagine running a business like that. And I said, can you tell me what the long-term strategic plan is? Like, what's the plan for why are we still in Afghanistan? And this was 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And she said, honestly, I can't answer that question. And that's a problem. She admitted it. And not like it was her problem to deal with, but you'd think that somebody in her position would have an idea. And it just went on and on. I would ask senators and Congress people, and you'd get a different answer, or it would be blank stares. And I knew, I'm like, this is a disaster. Like, this is such a tragedy that we're spending trillions of dollars and putting America's best and brightest in harm's way for no reason whatsoever. Like, and now it just kind of surfaces all at once, right? This kind of house of cards that we built in Afghanistan, for sure, a government that collapsed in minutes, is not one that was built that had a strong foundation. It was thoughtfully built, and that's what's kind of come to light. And the bigger issue is we have a trust issue. America has a big time trust issue now as a global power, probably number 2 behind China, in getting countries to trust them, because we go back on our word, we kill heads of state, we do all this stuff without any rhyme or reason. And you can't do that. Meanwhile, the Chinese are methodically kind of working on this 1,000-year plan that's been extremely effective. And now, I wrote about this on SoftRep the other day. The reason the Taliban were so emboldened is because they're backed by the Chinese. Like, they got the Chinese in their hip pockets. So yeah, they don't care. And the Chinese overtly backing them on TV, but covertly as well. So they're like getting military advice, probably weapons, support, all this stuff. And so now we're in a situation where we really can't mess with Afghanistan, because we'd be fighting a proxy war with China in a very similar sense that people didn't understand what was happening in Syria. Syria being a very strategic base for Russia into the Middle East. And that's what people didn't understand. Like, the reason Putin's backing Syria is because he's got a hugely important strategic military base in Syria, not letting that get out of his hands. So,
well, when I hear you talk about all this, right, these thoughts go through my head. Number one, of maybe, I will admit, I am very naive about this. I tend to be a person who thinks very positively about things, which I can't with the whole Afghanistan thing, or the Russian thing, or the China thing. I can't find it. But when the intellectual part of my brain goes in and looks at the Syria, the Iraq, the Afghanistan, I go, well, countries are going in, UN's going in, all these people are going in. And it's like the country just wants to stay the way they are. And is it the religious element that holds such deep sway of these conversations that are happening in religious locations, in homes, that, like, just no matter what, it wouldn't have mattered if the U.S. did a controlled exit. I mean, how many years have we been saying we're going to pull out of Afghanistan and train the Afghan thing? It wouldn't matter, because as soon as there wasn't some stronger physical presence, they were just going to drop anyway. I mean, granted, I see we could have gotten our base emptied, or whatever it was. But I think that people didn't think that it could fall as quick as it did.
Yeah, that also didn't surprise me. It's, again, you go back 20 years ago, there's a reason the Taliban had majority control of Afghanistan, because it was this, largely culturally driven, right, by religion. And so that never went away. My point was, we should have been out of there in 2003. We should have destroyed the training camps and just said, on the way out said, hey, this doesn't happen again, or you're going to hear from us. But we stayed, and we compromised all these people, and rather than like have a plan that pulls out with some dignity to take care of these interpreters, people that, back the US side, we just kind of like left in the middle of the night and said, hey, good luck. And then, to hear Biden say how disappointed he was the government didn't fight back. I'm like, are you kidding me? And so we just left all these people in the lurch, and some even Americans still stranded, trying to get out of Afghanistan. Yeah. It's going to fall and go back to the way it is, but let's at least come up with a plan that gets everybody out that's on our side safely. We take the weapons out, rather than just turn over the keys to these billions of dollars in weaponry, and get out and like, okay, we messed up. And then look, I'm very apolitical. I don't have a party, but I think, in particular, I remember, Biden and McCain talking about supporting rebels in Syria. And I'm like, how can you guys be that stupid? These rebels are essentially terrorists, and some of them ISIS. And like, how can you be that naive? And look what happened in Afghanistan when we backed the Mujahideen against the Soviets. We trained and armed what was to be Al-Qaeda in the future, and Osama bin Laden. So how can we not learn from these mistakes in the past? And
so is there an answer though, Brandon? I mean,
I think that if you got a lot of smart people in a room, and you could come up with a plan to promote democracy. And here's the issue: is any small or large business has a clear mission statement in the world, and people know what they stand for. And I don't think people do with America anymore. And that's a big problem we have. People don't know what we stand for. They look over at us and go, okay, one of the largest economies in the world, but what the hell is going on in America right now? It's like civil unrest. We have this two-party system that's really divided the country. And we have major issues with education and healthcare right now. It's one of the reasons why I encourage my kids to go to Europe for school. My son, 4.3 GPA, academic All-American, and for speech and debate, and among many other accomplishments, scored almost perfect on his ACT. Can't get into Stanford because the color of his skin and his dad has a good job. That's just like crazy. So now you have this, and I'm like, just go to Europe. You don't have to deal with all the BS. Make some global friends, and you'll get a different perspective. Plus, one of the top schools in the UK university system is $25,000 a year tuition. A
big difference.
Huge difference. And they get a bachelor in 3 years. So, yeah, we got big problems. And at least I would say I'm in the a couple of business groups. One of them, Young Presidents Organization, and we had a dinner with Colin Powell, a private dinner, and at least the word is getting out now. Like, look, you can't rely on government to fix these problems. The business leaders in America are going to have to start taking charge, and I think that's why you are seeing a lot of good things happen in business. Like they're taking these stands, right, for social change, and not all of it is is great, but I think it's encouraging, to see people, big brands taking a stand and saying this, especially on the environment,
right,
big one. So, yeah, we could talk foreign policy for hours, but it's something I'm passionate about. We cover it on SoftRep extensively. Foreign policy is something that we cover on a weekly basis. So,
well, I always appreciate your perspectives because, number one, I feel like they're nonpartisan, meaning it's just the reality, right?
Yeah.
this is what we see. This is from the military and the non-military point of view, which is why I was happy that you were willing to talk. And we had that seg that just really worked well to go to it anyway. I mean, I worry because of everything going on in the world today. I have lots of friends in Europe, and they're feeling uncertain about, will we recover from COVID? Will we recover from all this craziness that's happening in Afghanistan, with China, with Russia? Are we headed for, the end of the world as we know it? Climate change has become a political issue when it should be a human issue. Is it possible? Do you think it is? I think you have another book that you can write, take some of these articles you've written and write something about what are the possibilities? How can the average person like me begin to gain the true knowledge we need, right? Because we can't act from improper data.
Yeah.
So how do we get that to know, go fight this fight?
So if I put my optimist hat on, which I try and wear as much as I can, I actually think that the advancements in artificial intelligence on these complex problems is going to be like, we are at an inflection point with AI, in a way that there's many different AIs out there studying different problems. And I feel like climate change, economies, even global conflict, like we're going to get some extremely valuable insights. And the thing that's very cool about artificial intelligence is it can crawl everything and look at every data set and kind of arrive at a very non-emotional conclusion. So I think I subscribe to kind of the optimist side of artificial intelligence, which I think guys like Peter Thiel, who's the other one I'm thinking of, Peter Diomedes. There's a group that I follow that talk about AI and the advancements, and it's extremely fascinating. I'll try and send you this link. It's one of the best articles I've read that kind of summarizes everyone, like what's happening in artificial intelligence. And when you read this thing, it's going to keep you up a few nights, because you realize that the singularity event, which essentially is when computers reach the human level of intelligence, like they took the median of everyone, all these experts in AI, and the median singularity opinion is 20 years. So in about 20 years, we could reach this singularity event where AI has human level intelligence. But the scary thing is, when you think of like intelligence as 1,000 steps, the chimp is on step 3, human brain is on, say, step 6. When AI gets to the same step as a human brain, a week later, it's like 900 steps above.
Right.
And we can't even comprehend. That's the scary thing, is we won't even be able to comprehend what it knows or what it's thinking, because we're essentially like less than the chimp at that point.
And that's when we get into Skynet, HAL, 9000, all of those things. Have you listened to a podcast from the MIT Technology Review and Machines We Trust?
No, but I'll check it out, because the reason I got into AI was through some friends, but my son is super into machine learning and artificial intelligence, so we have many conversations, and it's exciting in many ways what the possibilities are. But the fascinating thing in this article I read was that it's about 50-50. Like 50% of the brightest minds think it's going to be an extinction event for humans, and the other 50% think it's going to save the human race. And so it's basically a coin flip, but it's a coin toss that you and I will probably see in our lifetime, which is pretty exciting or terrifying.
Within the next 2 decades. I don't see it going any further out than that. It might even be, in the next decade. By 2030, it's going to be a sea change with AI and its invasiveness into human reality, completely changing everything that we do and see. I think you should check out In Machines We Trust. I just interviewed Jennifer Strong. She's the host of the show. She's an amazing journalist. And we talked about it. And they just did a series on hiring and how AI is in hiring. But it's also and she used an avatar. They actually created an avatar to go into these hiring AIs and see how they can trick the system and how it perceives them. And it's really quite fascinating where it's going. But
I just sent you that link on the on that article. It's a great one.
I will add that link to this post so the listeners can see that as well. I mean, we started out the interview talking about a fiction book, Steal Fear, an amazing book that everybody needs to get, and that just came out in the last month. And then we segged into conversations with women in the military. We've talked about Afghanistan. We've talked about Europe and the American perception that Europe has about us, and why you've traveled and what it's been like for you to travel. What do you want to say to my listeners as we end the show today about, anything that we've talked about or anything you want them to know? And obviously we need to share how people can get your book, which seems so lighthearted considering our last conversation. But what I love is your books, fiction or nonfiction, how they trigger conversation. And that's kudos to you and John David Mann as well, because the whole point of books, of writing, is to make somebody think, change perspectives, give you new questions to ask.
Yeah, I would say my ask for the audience, besides go buy Steal Fear and leave a review, would be to remember that we need to have these conversations, and to resist the temptation of certainty. And by that I mean, don't be so gripped by these fixed ideas. Like, remember only a few hundred years ago, you were crazy to think that the world was round, right? Or that the sun didn't revolve around the earth. And so, just keep an open mind and know that, like, now more than ever, we need kindness, and we need conversations and debate, and to have a dialogue rather than just screaming at each other because we're on different teams, being political teams in America. Like, that's what I would remind people, just to have, more of these conversations, and then ask, to borrow from JFK, ask what you can do for the country, because it can't be solved by government alone. It's not going to happen.
Well, thank you for that. I love that. And I wrote something you just said, resist the temptation of certainty. I think if we say to ourselves, as you said, certainty doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. How can we make the world better? And plan for uncertainty and have that go to the betterment versus, I know it's not a word, the worsenment of the world and the situation. Okay, Brandon, how do people get the book? How do they get more information about you, find out about you, subscribe to awesome stuff you're doing?
The book is everywhere books are sold, Amazon being probably the easiest. You can go to stealfear.com for information about upcoming events, a little bit of sneak peek on book 2, Cold Fear. And then you can follow me on Instagram, just at Instagram and Twitter at Brandon, Brandont, for Tyler, Webb. So at Brandon T. Webb. And then my author website is my full name, brandontylerwebb.com. And that's about it.
That's a lot of places to go. So let's just remind everybody, get the book, Steal Fear, anywhere books are sold. Find out more about the book at stealfear.com. And then find you on Instagram. And your Instagram handle, Brandon, is?
At Brandon T. Webb.
At Brandon T. Webb, right. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your perspectives, Brandon, and for writing this book and all the other ones, because I want everybody to get every book you've written because they're so good. So dog-eared, every copy I have, and spark the conversation, right? Let's have people conversing and talking like we did here. I got to listen and see some different perspectives. And I know your son's sitting off on the side there, so I want to wish him all the best of luck when he goes back to school. And I hope he stays safe.
He's
and you
smiling,
guys.
nodding
Okay.
his head, smiling.
Okay, cool. Sorry. I love to give shout outs. All right. So thank you so much for being here, Brandon. And I know I've got John coming on the 31st of August. We're going to be talking about his perspective of writing the books with you and what he's learned. And that's always fun because you guys come at things from very different perspectives. But thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Laura.
All right, everybody. You know how I love Brandon. I love the conversations. I know that this was not our usual conversation we have on the show. Yes, we started out talking about books, but then we got into real world stuff that was happening because this show is about the questions. And Brandon gives us an opportunity with the knowledge he has to get us thinking about what we're reading in the media, what we're hearing in the media, what questions we're even asking ourselves. This show is about perspective shifting, giving you new information. So I would love for you to post and share not only about this book, which you got to get because it's so good, Steal Fear, but also about what you're thinking and how conversations are changing. We are people in this world, and it's important to have these conversations. So thank you so much all for being here today, for sharing in our time together, and I will see you next week. Have a great day, everyone, and remember, the right questions can change your life.